They said the West was built on grit, gunpowder, and the bones of the forgotten. But on that scorching afternoon, beneath the shadow of a dead oak tree, one woman's last breath could decide the fate of an entire people. Her name was Isla, Apache-born, fire in her veins, and she was hanging by a rope while the canyon winds carried her silent prayer. The noose bit into her skin, rough hemp fibers scraping her throat raw. Her legs kicked against the air, dust spinning up from the dry ground. The sun was merciless, blazing high, painting everything in shades of copper and blood. Isla's dark eyes, wide, fierce, unyielding, locked onto the man standing below her. Amos Kane. His scarred cheek twisted when he smiled, a cruel smile that never reached his eyes. In his hand he waved a folded deed, stamped with ink and greed. "Sign this paper," he barked, his voice gravelly and sharp as broken glass, "or the buzzards will have your bones before sundown." Isla's chest heaved, her voice hoarse but steady. "You can choke me with your rope, Kane, but you'll never choke my people's land out of my hands." For a moment, silence. Then Amos laughed, a jagged, ugly sound that bounced off the canyon walls. He sheathed his knife, confident she would give in to thirst and the brutal sun before long. Men like him believed time and terror always won. But high on the ridge, someone else was watching. Cole Briggs sat astride a chestnut stallion, his weathered hat pulled low against the glare. A rancher by trade, a loner by choice. His steel-gray eyes narrowed, following every desperate twist of Isla's body against the rope. His hand rested on the hilt of the knife at his belt, calloused fingers twitching. The West had taught men to mind their own business. To look away when Kane's shadow fell across the land. Cole knew that truth as well as anyone. But seeing Isla's spirit refuse to break lit a fire inside him he couldn't smother. "No one deserves to die like this," he muttered under his breath, the words tasting of dust and regret. The wind picked up, scattering red grit across the rocks. Cole swung down from his saddle, boots crunching against brittle earth. He didn't reach for the rifle slung across his horse. Too loud, too messy. A gunshot would echo for miles. But a knife, that was quiet justice. He tightened his jaw, slipped the blade free and started down the slope. Each step sent loose stones tumbling, his silhouette blending into the haze of heat rising from the canyon floor. The world shrank to the rasp of rope against raw skin, the hiss of his own breath, and the cruel laughter echoing below. Isla's head drooped, her body growing limp, yet even in fading strength her eyes still burned with defiance. Cole's heart hammered. He wasn't riding into this to be a hero. He was riding in because the West was full of men like Amos Kane, and maybe, just maybe, it needed one man who wouldn't turn away. Cole Briggs moved like a shadow down the slope, his boots sinking into the brittle dirt, the canyon heat pressing against his back. Every step was deliberate, steady, quiet. A man didn't get second chances with Amos Kane, not out here where the law was often just the fastest bullet. From below, Isla's body jerked weakly against the rope. Her breath rasped like dry wind through broken reeds. Still, there was no surrender in her face. Even in the grip of death, she held the pride of her ancestors, that unshakable fire that had carried her people through storms and wars. Cole's jaw clenched. He had buried too many friends, too many dreams, to stand and watch another innocent life strangled out by greed. His knife glimmered in the sun, old steel but sharp as vengeance. He slid behind a jagged outcrop, pressing his back to the rock. His heart thudded like a war drum. He could hear Amos muttering to himself, pacing beneath the oak, boots grinding against the cracked earth. "She'll give in," Kane sneered, spitting into the dust. "They all give in when the sun burns them hollow." Cole peeked around the rock. Amos's scarred face was turned away, his revolver loose at his side, too sure of his victory to keep watch. The rancher drew a long breath, pulling his hat low, eyes locked on that rope tightening around Isla's throat. Then he moved. Loose stones rattled under his boots as he lunged from the slope. The knife flashed, slicing through the rope in one brutal stroke. Isla's body dropped like a cut branch, but instead of hitting the dirt, she collapsed into Cole's arms. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her pulse faint beneath bruised skin. She clutched at his shirt, voice barely a whisper. "Don't leave me." Cole pressed a finger to her lips, steady but gentle. "Quiet now. You're safe." A faint crunch echoed across the canyon floor. Cole's head snapped up. Amos Kane was turning back, suspicion flaring in his eyes. "You," he growled, his voice low and venomous. "You got a death wish, rancher?" Cole lowered Isla behind the rock, his broad shoulders rising like a wall between her and the outlaw. Dust swirled around him, the knife still clenched tight in his calloused hand. He didn't answer. Words were wasted on men like Amos. The outlaw's revolver rose, sunlight glinting off the steel barrel. "I'll string you up right next to her," Kane hissed. His voice cracked with rage, echoing across the canyon. Cole stood his ground, shoulders squared, eyes hard as the desert stone. The West had taught him silence could be as sharp as any blade. For one breath, the world hung still, the buzz of flies, the caw of circling crows, the dry rasp of Isla fighting for air. Then thunder split the canyon. The first shot kicked dirt at Cole's boots. Gunpowder stung the air. But the rancher didn't flinch. Instead he shifted, weight low, ready to move, ready to risk everything for the woman he just cut down. This was no longer about land or law. This was survival. And in the cruel heart of the Wild West, survival was bought with blood. The echo of gunfire rolled through the canyon like thunder off distant mountains. Dust leapt from the ground at Cole Briggs's boots, the acrid sting of gunpowder burning in the air. Amos Kane's revolver smoked in his scarred hand, his crooked smile twisting with satisfaction. "You got guts, rancher," Kane barked, his voice sharp and cruel. "But guts don't keep a man breathing out here." Cole said nothing. Silence had always been his weapon. His steel-gray eyes never wavered from the outlaw's gun, every muscle tight, ready to spring. Behind the rock, Isla pressed trembling fingers against the angry welt circling her neck, her dark eyes wide with both fear and stubborn fire. The second shot cracked, shattering the silence. Cole moved. He dove to the side, dirt exploding where he just stood. He rolled, boots finding purchase in the hard ground, then rose like a shadow out of the dust. The knife gleamed in his hand, old steel catching the sun. Amos cursed, squeezing the trigger again. The canyon lit with the flash of muzzle fire. Bullets howled past, one sparking off stone, another slicing air where Cole's chest had been a heartbeat earlier. But Cole wasn't running. He was closing the distance. Every stride was a storm, his boots pounding, his body low and compact. The outlaw's eyes widened, too slow to believe a man would charge straight into lead. The revolver barked again, but this time Cole twisted, the bullet grazing his sleeve instead of his flesh. And then the fight was no longer about distance. The rancher hit him like a bull. Amos staggered back, his revolver flying from his grip, clattering into the dirt. The two men slammed together, fists flying, dust billowing around them like smoke from a wildfire. Amos threw a savage punch, his scarred cheek slick with sweat and rage. Cole answered with an elbow that cracked bone. The outlaw snarled, driving his head forward, but Cole's knife flashed, knocking the strike aside. The rope that had nearly taken Isla's life still dangled from the oak above, swinging in the dry wind. As they grappled, it brushed against Cole's shoulder like a grim reminder. Isla crouched lower, clutching her chest, her heart hammering so hard it hurt. She wanted to cry out, to rush forward, but her body trembled with exhaustion. All she could do was watch. The rancher who had saved her, the outlaw who had nearly destroyed her, locked in a fight that would decide not just her fate, but the fate of her people's land. The dust thickened, the air heavy with sweat, blood and rage. Cole's calloused fists hammered down, each strike fueled not by glory but by a quiet fury that men like Amos believed no longer existed. With one final heave, Cole slammed the outlaw into the dirt, his knee pressing hard across his chest. He yanked the very rope Amos had tied around Isla's throat and bound the man's wrists behind his back. Amos spat blood, snarling like a caged wolf. "She belongs to me. That land belongs to me." Cole's voice came out low, steady as stone. "She belongs to no one. And land ain't something you steal. It's something you honor." The canyon fell still. Only the rasp of the wind and the beat of Isla's unsteady breath lingered. And for the first time the outlaw's smile was gone. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Smoke from Amos Kane's revolver curled in the blistering air, hanging like a ghost between the two men. The outlaw's scarred face gleamed with sweat, his smile mean and jagged. "You picked the wrong side, Briggs," Amos snarled, cocking the revolver again. "Folks who stand in my way don't last long." Cole Briggs didn't flinch. His steel-gray eyes stayed locked on the man beneath the oak tree, the noose swaying above them like a vulture waiting to feed. Behind the rocks, Isla clutched her bruised throat, trying to steady her breath, her dark eyes still fierce despite the raw welt circling her skin. The gun cracked. The bullet slammed into dirt inches from Cole's boot, spraying grit across his trousers. The canyon thundered with the echo. Cole moved. He lunged low, boots tearing up dust as he drove straight toward the outlaw. A second shot ripped through the air, grazing his sleeve, but he didn't slow. Amos cursed, firing again, but the rancher twisted, his body cutting through the haze like a phantom. By the time Amos realized what was happening, Cole was on him. The two men collided with a force that rattled the dead oak. The revolver flew from Amos's grip, clattering against the rocks. They hit the ground in a cloud of red dust, fists flying, bones cracking. Amos roared like a cornered beast, driving a punch into Cole's ribs. Cole answered with a brutal elbow to his jaw, the sound sharp as a breaking branch. Isla pressed her back against the rock, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream to beg them to stop, but her throat still burned and all she could do was watch. Every blow, every grunt, carried her fate in its echo. Amos clawed at Cole's face, his scarred cheek split open again, blood smearing across the dust. "She's mine," he spat, rage dripping from every word. "Her land is mine." Cole's response came low and steady, like stone grinding against stone. "She belongs to no one. And neither does her land." The fight raged on, raw and desperate. Amos drove his head forward, splitting Cole's lip. Cole countered, slamming the outlaw into the dirt, his calloused fists hammering down. Years of ranch work, ropes, cattle, storms, had hardened him into something more than muscle. He was a man who'd carried grief, loss, and still kept standing. Amos tried to scramble for his fallen revolver, but Cole was faster. He snatched the frayed rope dangling from the oak and wrapped it around the outlaw's wrists, jerking it tight. Amos bucked and cursed, eyes blazing with fury. "You'll regret this, Briggs. Nobody crosses me and walks away." Cole leaned close, his steel-gray gaze burning through the dust. "You should have thought of that before you put a rope around her neck." The canyon went silent again, save for Amos's ragged breathing and Isla's quiet gasp. She touched her bruised throat, tears brimming but not falling. For the first time since the noose slipped over her head, hope flickered in her chest. Cole hauled Amos upright, the outlaw's arms bound, his face pressed into the dirt. The sun beat down, casting long shadows across the ground. For now Isla was alive. For now justice had the upper hand. But in the west, for now was never enough. The rope dug deep into Amos Kane's wrists as Cole Briggs forced him to the ground, pinning him like a wild steer in the dust. The outlaw thrashed, spitting curses, his scarred cheeks smeared with blood and dirt. "You think this ends here, rancher?" Amos growled through clenched teeth. "You'll wish you'd left me swinging." Cole tightened the knot, his calloused hands unshakable. "You've done enough hanging for one day." Behind the rocks, Isla struggled to her feet. Her voice was faint but steady. "Cole, don't let him." The warning cut short. Amos twisted like a snake, kicking his boot into the dirt. In that quick motion, his hand slipped to the heel of his boot, tugging free a hidden blade no bigger than a pocket knife. With a sudden jerk, he sliced the rope binding his wrists. Cole caught the glint of steel too late. Amos lunged, slashing upward, the blade grazing across Cole's shoulder. Blood darkened his shirt, warm and sticky under the scorching sun. Cole staggered back, knife raised, eyes sharp with fury. Isla gasped, pressing her hand to her mouth as the fight sparked alive once more. Amos grinned through blood-stained teeth. "Takes more than rope to stop me." The outlaw dove for his revolver lying in the dirt. Cole lunged too, their boots pounding against the ground, dust rising like smoke from a fire. Amos reached first, fingers brushing cold steel. A shot split the canyon. The revolver bucked in Amos's grip, the bullet screaming past Cole's ear and sparking off the rock wall. Isla ducked low, heart hammering as echoes bounced off the stone cliffs. Cole tackled Amos before he could fire again. The gun spun out of reach, clattering across the dirt. They hit the ground hard, fists colliding, knees driving, bones cracking beneath raw force. The two men rolled through the dust, each blow echoing like thunder. Amos's blade sliced the air, cutting a line across Cole's sleeve. Cole answered with a crushing fist to the outlaw's jaw. The crack rang sharp, but still Amos fought like a beast cornered. Above them, the noose swayed gently in the dry wind, a grim reminder of what had almost been Isla's grave. She pressed her back to the rock, her hands trembling, her bruised throat burning with every breath. Watching them was like staring into the heart of a storm, violent, unpredictable, merciless. Cole wrenched the knife from Amos's grip and hurled it aside. Dust streaked his face, blood soaking his shirt, but his steel-gray eyes burned steady. He drove the outlaw down, one hand crushing Amos's throat, the other holding the knife he'd carried from his belt. Amos choked, thrashing in the dirt. His voice rasped through clenched teeth. "You ain't strong enough, Briggs. I'll come back again and again. She and her land will be mine." Cole pressed harder, his voice low, steady as stone. "Not while I'm still breathing." The canyon fell quiet, save for the harsh sound of their labored breaths. The fight wasn't finished, not by a long shot, but in that moment under the burning sun, one truth settled in the dust. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for justice. And justice in the Wild West was never clean. The canyon air hung heavy with dust and sweat, every breath sharp as broken glass. Cole Briggs tightened his grip, forcing Amos Kane back into the dirt. The outlaw's chest heaved under the weight of the rancher's arm, his scarred face streaked with blood and fury. "You think you've won," Amos spat, coughing against the grit. "This land don't belong to her. It belongs to men strong enough to take it." Cole's steel-gray eyes narrowed, his jaw locked tight. He glanced toward Isla, who leaned against the rocks, one hand clutching the bruises on her neck, the other pressed over a folded bundle hidden against her chest. Her breath was shallow, but her gaze never wavered. "She belongs to no one," Cole growled, his voice rough as gravel. "And that land belongs to the people who bled for it." With a hard pull, he yanked Amos upright. The outlaw staggered, still bound by the remnants of rope Cole had managed to retie around his wrists. Cole shoved him forward, forcing him down the dusty trail, every step punctuated by the drag of his boots against rock. Isla limped after them, clutching the packet of papers tight. The edges were torn, but the seal was unbroken. The proof that her father's claim, her people's right to their homeland, still stood. She held it like it was the last ember of a fire about to die out. The sun dipped lower, turning the canyon walls into glowing copper. The wind shifted, carrying with it the dry caw of circling crows. Each sound reminded Cole that the West had long memories for blood, and men like Amos never truly stayed down. Isla's voice broke through the silence, soft but steady. "You risked your life for me. Why?" Cole didn't look back. His boots crunched against the brittle ground, eyes fixed ahead. "Because I've buried enough good people to know no one should die on the end of a rope. Not while I can still draw breath." Her steps faltered, but she steadied herself, lifting her chin despite the pain etched across her face. "My father fought his whole life to keep this land. If I lose it now, he dies all over again." Cole glanced at her, just long enough for a flicker of warmth to touch his gaze. He gave a slow nod. "Then we won't lose it." Amos barked a laugh, wild and bitter. "You think the law'll side with her? The law's just another man's rope. And I've bought more lawmen than cattle in this county." Cole shoved him harder, sending him stumbling. "We'll see what the sheriff thinks." The trail narrowed, winding toward the ridge that led back into town. Shadows stretched long, painting the land in dark streaks of red and gold. Amos's laughter echoed in the hollow spaces, but Cole kept pushing, one hand gripping the rope, the other resting near his knife. Beside him, Isla clutched the papers tighter, her resolve hardening with each step. The fight had nearly stolen her breath, but her spirit still burned. The West was cruel, but not every man had forgotten honor. And as Cole Briggs marched Amos Kane down that dusty road, Isla knew, this rancher wasn't just saving her life. He was standing guard over her people's future. The sun sagged lower in the sky, turning the canyon into a furnace of copper and fire. Cole Briggs walked with a steady stride, one fist gripping the rope tied around Amos Kane's bound wrists. Each tug jerked the outlaw forward, boots dragging furrows into the brittle ground. Behind them, Isla followed, her steps uneven but growing stronger with each mile. The papers clutched to her chest were smudged with dust and sweat, yet she held them as though they were sacred scripture. Every glance at them reminded her that her father's blood had not been spilled in vain. Amos broke the silence with a snarl. "You think parading me through town changes anything, Briggs? Folks know my name. They fear it. Fear doesn't break with a rope." Cole didn't bother to answer. His steel-gray eyes stayed locked on the trail winding out of the canyon. The man had learned long ago that words were wasted on snakes. Isla's voice, though faint, cut through the dry wind. "You should have left him for the crows. He'll only rise again." Cole slowed, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow across the ground. "Maybe. But justice isn't found at the end of a noose, not if I can help it. The sheriff will deal with him." Amos laughed, bitter and mocking. "The sheriff? I've bought lawmen before. Gold weighs heavier than justice in these parts." Cole yanked the rope hard, silencing him with a stumble. "Not this time." They pressed on. The land stretched wide and empty, nothing but red earth, brittle brush and the faraway cry of hawks. Sweat trickled down Cole's temples, soaking into his shirt where blood from his shoulders still seeped. Pain throbbed with every step, but his grip never loosened. Isla drew closer, her eyes searching his face. "Why fight for me? We're not kin. Not even the same people." Cole finally met her gaze. "Because the West is full of men like him. And if folks keep looking the other way, pretty soon there won't be anything left worth saving. Her throat tightened, not just from the rope burns but from the weight of his words. She tightened her hold on the papers. Then I'll fight too. My people's land will not be taken by fear. For the first time, Cole allowed a trace of a smile to touch his weathered face. It wasn't joy, it was respect. But the moment didn't last. As the trail narrowed near the canyon's mouth, Amos staggered, his shoulders hunching forward. Cole tugged, but the outlaw bent lower, his hands twisting toward the heel of his boot. A glint of steel caught the dying sunlight. In a single jerk, Amos sliced the rope binding his wrists. He spun, eyes wild, lunging at Cole with the hidden blade. The impact knocked them both into the dirt, dust exploding around them. Isla screamed, stumbling back as blood spattered across the rocks. The fight was far from finished. The struggle tumbled them both down the slope, boots kicking up dirt and rocks. Cole Briggs hit the ground hard, Amos Kane's blade flashing in the dying sun. The outlaw slashed wild, cutting a shallow line across Cole's shoulder, blood seeping into the torn fabric of his shirt. Cole grunted, rolling away, dust filling his lungs. Isla's scream echoed off the canyon walls as she stumbled toward the edge of an abandoned timber yard just outside town. The place lay in ruin, stacks of rotting planks leaning against one another like skeletons of forgotten homes. Shadows stretched long through the piles, swallowing everything in dark, jagged shapes. Amos charged, eyes blazing with fury, his laughter sharp and cruel. "You can't stop me, Briggs. She'll be mine and so will her land." Cole braced, pulling himself upright. His knife glinted in his hand, steel-gray eyes locked on the outlaw. "Over my dead body." The two men crashed into the yard, fists and blades colliding in a blur of rage and desperation. The sound of their fight clattered like iron on iron, echoing through the hollow stacks of wood. Boards toppled, sending splinters flying as boots slammed against the dirt. Cole struck first, driving his fist into Amos's jaw. The outlaw reeled back but countered with a savage slash that tore across Cole's sleeve. Pain ripped through his arm, but the rancher's grip on his knife didn't waver. Isla crouched behind a pile of timber, her breath ragged, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Her bruised hands brushed against the dust until they closed around something cold. Her gaze fell on Amos's fallen revolver lying just feet away. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, the weight of it heavy, unnatural. She raised it, her arms shaking, sight trained on the man who had nearly stolen her life. Amos caught the movement from the corner of his eye. He sneered, voice dripping venom. "Go on, girl. Do it. Prove you're no better than me." Cole, locked in the struggle, shot her a look through the haze of dust and blood. His eyes said more than words ever could. "Don't lose yourself to him." Isla's breath hitched, tears burning her eyes. The revolver trembled in her grasp. For a heartbeat, she saw her father, his weathered face, the way he had told her their land was sacred, not something to be defended with vengeance but with honor. Her scream broke the silence. She hurled the gun aside, the clatter echoing through the timber stacks. "No. I will not become like you." The defiance in her voice struck deeper than any blade. Cole seized the moment, every ounce of strength surging through him. He twisted Amos's wrist, sending the knife spinning into the dirt, then slammed the outlaw into the ground with the force of a hammer striking an anvil. Dust billowed, boards rattled, and for the first time, Amos lay still, gasping under the crushing weight of defeat. But even in that moment, Cole knew, the fight wasn't over. Not until the law arrived, and not until every shadow of Amos Kane's power was burned from the land. The timber yard lay in shambles, boards scattered, dust thick in the air like smoke from a prairie fire. Cole Briggs knelt in the dirt, one knee pressing hard into Amos Kane's chest, his knife gleaming at the outlaw's throat. Sweat dripped from his brow, blood soaked his torn shirt, but his steel-gray eyes burned with steady fire. Amos writhed beneath him, his breath ragged, his scarred face twisted in hate. "You ain't man enough to finish it," he spat, blood flecking his lips. "You let me live, I'll take it all back, the girl, her land, even your ranch." Cole's jaw tightened. His knife hovered an inch above Amos's throat. In the silence that followed, the whole timber yard seemed to listen, waiting for the blade to fall. Then a voice cut through the dust. "Stop." Isla stepped forward from the shadows, her frame trembling but her eyes unyielding. She still bore the rope marks around her throat, her face pale with exhaustion, but in her hands she held the revolver she had thrown aside moments earlier. Now she lowered it to the dirt, the choice clear in her shaking fingers. "No more blood," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "I will not be his mirror." Cole glanced at her, his breath heavy, his shoulders taut with rage. For a heartbeat, his instincts screamed to end Amos here and now. But Isla's words rooted deep. The outlaw snarled, struggling harder under Cole's weight. "You're weak, both of you. Mercy gets you buried out here." Isla stepped closer, the last light of the setting sun painting her face in copper and gold. "Mercy makes me stronger than you'll ever be." Her voice carried more power than the revolver ever could. And Cole understood. This fight wasn't just about survival, it was about what kind of future they would leave behind. With a sharp motion, Cole yanked Amos's arms behind him, binding them again with the same rope that had nearly ended Isla's life. This time he pulled until the outlaw howled, his wrists raw from the strain. The noise of boots on gravel broke through the standoff. Lanterns flickered at the edge of the yard, their light bouncing across the stacks of timber. The sheriff and a handful of townsfolk rushed in, drawn by the gunfire and shouts. "Hold him there, Briggs," the sheriff called, revolver drawn. "We'll take it from here." Amos twisted against the rope, spitting curses that echoed into the night. "You think the law'll save you? I'll own this land before I rot." But no one listened anymore. Two deputies grabbed him, dragging him to his knees while the sheriff snapped iron shackles around his wrists. The outlaw's voice cracked with rage, but the sound was drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd. Isla stood in the glow of the lanterns, her bruised throat visible, the deed clutched tight to her chest. Whispers swept through the townsfolk, admiration, disbelief, shame for having ever doubted her. Cole rose beside her, his broad frame casting a long shadow across the ground. He didn't speak, but his hand found her shoulder, steady, rough and real. Isla's lips trembled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You gave me more than my life tonight. You gave me back my home." Cole's gaze softened just for a moment. His voice came low, solid as the canyon walls. "Then hold on to it. Don't let anyone take it from you again." The timber yard fell into silence, broken only by the clank of Amos Kane's shackles. And for the first time since the sun had risen, hope breathed through the dust. The timber yard buzzed with lantern light and hushed voices as the sheriff's deputies hauled Amos Kane to his feet. The outlaw's scarred face glistened with sweat and blood, his wrists bound tight in iron shackles. He jerked against them like a wild horse, but the steel held firm. "You can't stop me," Amos roared, his voice echoing across the yard. "This girl, her land, even you, Briggs, you'll all bow before me. You hear me?" The sheriff shoved him hard toward the waiting deputies. "Save your breath, Kane. You'll have plenty of time to scream behind bars." Cole Briggs stood tall in the dust, shoulders squared, blood soaking his torn shirt. His knife still dangled at his side, but his steel-gray eyes had softened as they shifted toward Isla. She stood near him in the glow of lanterns, her neck marked red and raw, but her posture proud. The bundle of papers clutched to her chest gleamed with the seal of her father's legacy. The townsfolk gathered, their murmurs weaving together like a rising tide. Some voices whispered doubt, others guilt, but most stared in silence at the Apache woman who had faced death and refused to bend. Isla lifted her chin, her dark eyes sweeping over them. Her voice, though hoarse, carried strength. "This land is ours. My father bled for it. And tonight proved no rope, no blade, no outlaw can take it from us." Her words stilled the crowd. For the first time, those who had turned away from Amos's tyranny found themselves standing face to face with courage they could not deny. Cole stepped to her side, resting a calloused hand on her shoulder. His touch was steady, firm, a quiet vow that she was not alone. Isla's lips trembled, but this time it wasn't fear, it was relief. The sheriff turned to Cole. "You've done the law a service, Briggs. But you've also made yourself a target. Men like Kane don't walk this earth without shadows following." Cole gave a curt nod, his voice low, rough. "I'll take my chances." Amos spat into the dirt, struggling against the deputies. "You think this is over? I'll come back. Men like me don't die in chains." Cole's gaze met his, cold and unflinching. "Then pray you do, Kane. Because if you ever crawl out again, I'll be waiting." The outlaw snarled, his curses trailing as he was dragged toward town, his boots scraping the dust. The clink of his shackles echoed like a grim hymn of defeat. The townsfolk slowly dispersed, lanterns dimming one by one until the night pressed close. Only Cole and Isla remained beneath the stars, their shadows long across the timber piles. Isla clutched the deed tighter, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I'd lost everything. But now, I see my father still here in every piece of this land." Cole looked down at her, a rare flicker of warmth breaking through his hard gaze. "This land holds on to those who honor it. Just like people. The night was quiet save for the faint jingle of chains carrying Amos away. Yet in the stillness, Cole's gut tightened. Somewhere out there in the darkness, he knew, the outlaw's reach wasn't done. Night settled over the border town, the last traces of sunset fading into a canopy of stars. The streets were quiet, only the shuffle of boots and the clink of iron chains echoing as deputies dragged Amos Kane toward the jailhouse. His curses carried through the dark, bitter and hollow, but fewer ears bothered to listen now. Cole Briggs walked beside Isla, their steps slow, deliberate, the dust still clinging to their clothes. The townsfolk peeked from doorways, lanterns flickering in their hands. Some nodded with respect, others simply stared in silence. No jeers. No whispers of doubt. Only a kind of hushed acknowledgement that something had shifted in the heart of their town. Isla's voice broke the stillness, soft but steady. For so long they turned away. Tonight they finally saw. She lifted the deed to her chest, her fingers tracing its edges. Her eyes glistened, though not with fear this time, with pride. Cole gave a small nod, his steel-gray eyes softer now. The West don't change easy. But courage has a way of cutting through silence. They stopped in front of the saloon, its porch empty, the swing of its door creaking faintly in the breeze. Isla looked up at the night sky, the bruises still visible across her throat. I thought I had lost everything. But now I know. My father still lives in this land, in me, and in every soul willing to stand beside it. Cole studied her for a long moment. His broad shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but there was respect in his gaze, carved deep like stone weathered by years of wind. Then you hold on to it, he said. Don't let anyone else decide your future. A shadow flickered at the far end of the street. Cole's eyes sharpened instantly. A lone rider on horseback slipped into the darkness beyond the lamplight, the faint glint of steel catching the moon. One of Amos's men, disappearing into the wild night. Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't say a word, but he knew the fight wasn't truly over. Outlaws didn't vanish just because the law clapped irons on one man. Hatred had a way of finding new faces, new shadows. But for now, peace settled across the street. Isla stood taller, her spirit unbroken, her future back in her hands. And Cole, though tired, bloodied and worn, felt something stir inside him he hadn't known in years. A purpose. The West had always been a place of dust, blood and silence. Yet on this night, beneath the wide sweep of stars, it had also been a place of honor. Cole tipped his hat, his voice low, steady. Come morning we'll see what justice brings. Tonight you rest. Isla gave him a faint smile, weary but true. For the first time, hope stretched before her like the long horizon. The town exhaled. The stars watched. And the West, scarred but unbroken, waited for the dawn. What do you think, folks? Out here on the frontier, does mercy make you stronger or does it leave you open to danger?